So, this is the third part of my series on RPG design skills. As usual, I have an addendum for the previous video, this time involving language. Role-playing games like Android list special words to use during play. Dungeons & Dragons does a bit of this too, but instead of providing a list of slang, it lists equipment, monsters, and places. But there's more. Some RPGs have special ways of speaking, whether it's the carefully chosen words of Happy Birthday Robot or the flowery language of Polaris, Tragedy at the Utmost North. This sort of language helps people immerse themselves in the game setting. You don't have to speak way, but it helps you immerse yourself. They're suggestions. We're going to be talking about suggestions and how they can transform a collection of disconnected rules into a storytelling machine. The first edition of Dungeons & Dragons is a mess of a game. Okay? Early games were inspired by historical wargaming to include referees, later called Dungeon Masters, DMs, but not in this edition. Referees in historical wargaming controlled the hidden elements of scenarios. Dungeons & Dragons advised one referee per 4 to 50 players. This indicated that players didn't deviate from the scenario often. When they did, the referee would be able to improvise both story and invent rules. Of course, we use a far different ratio today. Early games one determined by both the game and the individual playstyles. Dungeons & Dragons, or at least later editions of it, seems to work best with 5 to 7 players, while indie games, like Polaris, usually have 3 to 5 players, or in this case, no GM, but 4 players specifically for Polaris. The main difference is the desire for personal plots. But there is a game that tried to eliminate the role of referee, which I no longer own, called 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons. 4th assumed everyone wanted to follow D&D standard plot. If you don't remember, that plot consists of fighting monsters, gathering treasure, then fighting bigger monsters to gather more treasure ad infinitum. It failed miserably. Not only did it prevent players from pursuing their personal goals, it interfered with competitive play too, wherein players jockeyed to get ahead of each other by doing their own thing, whatever that was. It accomplished this by turning the many previous edition suggestions, like dungeons, into rules. It also eliminated other opportunities for role-playing by standardizing such things as taverns. What we learned from this experiment is that rules can't replace referees. Board games like Gloomhaven get rid of referees too, but board gamers have very different expectations from role players. Yes, there are RPGs that don't have referees, like Pilgrims of the Flying Temple, but the referee's responsibilities are just reassigned, not written out of the game, like in 4th. That said, there is a game designer of the new Master of Suggestion called Vincent Baker. He wrote Apocalypse World. Apocalypse World doesn't have a setting, but it strongly implies a world similar to Mad Max. One of the more obvious suggestions is Barforth Apocalyptica. He goes on to explain, cultivate an imagine of harsh landscapes, garish bloody images, and grotesque juxtapositions, such as out among the wrecked cards, wild dogs fight for territory with each other and with the rats, and one of the breeds is developing a protective inner eyelid of blank bone. If you get too close to them, you can hear the click-click of when they blink. That's pretty evocative. Another suggestion is ask provocative questions and build on the answers. Baker then describes how one referee wrote down a list of prompts and let that guide his story creation. So, what is a suggestion? It's something that exists between the rules and setting, often helping out with the parts of the story that aren't covered by either. Suggestions can range from an evocative title, like Dungeons and Dragons, to advice for starting scenes in Polaris. It should be noted that this section on starting scenes is kept separate from the rules on the same issue. So it is advice. So, more than rules and settings, good advice separates game designers at the beginning of their careers from the ones who are more experienced. There are two ways to learn how to write good advice: to read and practice it, and to learn through experience. Like rules and settings, suggestions also have a narrative form called Let's Plays. Basically, this is an entire session of the game, recorded and made available to the public somehow. Happy Birthday Robot seems to devote an entire chapter to these, but they fail because no mention of what each player does is included. Let's Plays need to include everything: what players do, what their characters do, the following of suggestions, everything. You can even show the players choosing to ignore certain rules, which is a suggestion that should be in every rulebook. And while it could be printed, most Let's Plays are mostly usually found in YouTube or Twitch videos. Anyways, that's just what I've been thinking about. My next video will be about two special types of examples: characters and adventures. Until then, have a great day, and Dewey!